Are you ready to boost your confidence when selling so you're able to close more deals? Nikki Rausch will show you how to build a foundation of skills and a mindset that creates sales success without feeling pushy or salesy and without fear of rejection. She is a sales strategist and coach with more than 25 years of sales experience and is master certified in neuro-linguistic programming. This is a radically different approach to selling. It's a no sleaze, no slime, and no stress approach to building your business. This is Sales Maven. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch, your own personal sales maven, here to offer you tips, techniques, and strategies to master your sales conversation. Today's episode is all about business development through introductions. I want to offer some do's and don'ts for you. This particular episode came about from a listener, somebody who had reached out and asked if I would go into a little bit more detail than I did in a previous episode where I talked about how to reach prospects when selling, and I give some details of how to warm up some sales calls in that particular episode. If you haven't listened to that episode, you might want to go back and listen to it before you listen to this one, although you certainly don't have to, but there will be some additional details in that episode that I might refer to. Before we jump into the content, I do want to give a shout out for somebody who took the time to leave a written review for the podcast. I am always super flattered to hear that people listen to the podcast, and I am even more touched when somebody takes time out of their day to write a review. So this particular review is from Leo in the Ville, and here is what Leo has to say. It says, "This is where my collaborators and mentors hang out. I devour the Sales Maven podcast every week. Before Nikki started her own show, I would search the podcast app to find her appearances. I knew when I first heard Nikki's advice that I would need more of her support to be successful as a new entrepreneur. I finally joined the Sales Maven Society, and now I know that this is where so many of the experts I've hired and collaborated with hang out. Thanks, Nikki, for sharing your knowledge with us and creating a valuable community." Well, thank you so much for leaving the review. And of course, we love having you in the Sales Maven Society. And I love that you're finding that your experts and collaborators hang out there. It is an incredible group of people. I seriously want to pinch myself most days that I get to hang out in that community as well. So I'm glad you and I are in alignment when it comes to that. All right, so let's jump in and talk about introductions. I mentioned earlier that I did a show called How to Reach Prospects When Selling, and in there I give 3 ways to warm up sales calls. The number one way, and this is something I work with clients all the time on, is asking for introductions. It's the easiest way to open a door with a new potential prospect is when somebody who knows you, who likes you, who believes in your work is willing to make an introduction on your behalf. You're so much more likely to get the attention of the person that you want to speak with when somebody that they have rapport with or somebody who has credibility with them is willing to make this introduction. Now, once the introduction happens, there's some key critical things that you want to do. And then, of course, there's some things you want to not do in order to keep the rapport going, in order for you to start to build credibility on your own with this person. So when a client and listener of the show had reached out, it was because there were 2 particular incidents where one, she had been asked by somebody to make an introduction on their behalf, which she did, and it didn't go well. And then on another one where somebody had made an introduction on her behalf, some things that also didn't really go well too. So that's how I kind of came up with these do's and don'ts that I'm going to share with you today, with the idea that you can start to have some more awareness when you are asking for introductions, maybe even when you're giving introductions. So here's the first one. When you are asking for an introduction, here's one do. Do ask in a kind and in a very specific way. Be specific in your request. If you are too vague, if you say something, and this is the don't, if you say like, would you introduce me to everybody you know who would benefit from my product or service, that's too big. You need to be more specific, because everybody I know a lot of people, that seems like a lot of work for me. I'm probably not going to do it. So when you're asking for an introduction, be specific. When you can actually ask for an introduction to a specific person, that's best. Or a type of person. Or instead of saying, would you introduce me to everybody you know, you might say, would you be willing to introduce me to 2 or 3 people who would benefit from X, Y, and Z, if that's the way you're going to go. So the task cannot feel overwhelming to the person making the introduction, because we're all busy and they're doing you a favor by making the introduction. So you need to make it easy for them. But the other thing about being specific that I want to dig into a little bit is when you're willing to even write up some language that they could just cut and paste if they chose to. Of course, you give them the option of, editing it or making any tweaks to it that they want to. But if you would write up that little introduction for them and include it or send it to them after they agree to the introduction, you're going to make it so much easier for them to do it. And when you make it easy for people to do things, they're so much more likely to do it. So take that extra step if they're open to it, to actually writing up the introduction. Now, it can feel uncomfortable sometimes to write up something where you're writing it about yourself and it's really glowing, right? Like, of course you want to put yourself in the best position, but it's also a lot of us, I find, our inclination is to want to play a little small. This is not the time to play small in your introduction. So only say things, of course, that are true, stand in integrity, and at the same time, be okay with tooting your horn a little bit. And it doesn't have to be first of all, it shouldn't be written like, hey, I am so amazing, and here's all these things that make me so great. No, instead, write it like, if somebody was writing an introduction, I'm going to write this for them. I would say, Nikki and I have known each other for 5 years. We met initially in this particular instance. I've had the great pleasure of working with her over the years, specifically on, improving my discovery process, honing my, storytelling ability and something else, whatever that would be. I have found great value in the work that I've done with her, and I thought that she might be somebody who could be a resource to you as you're growing your own business, right? Like, I could write that up about myself, only, again, say things that are true, but be willing to take the effort to do it. So take a step out of the person having to make the introduction by having them have to write it too. Because what can sometimes happen when you leave it up to them to write it is they're busy. And so they're going to write it really fast. And they're going to be like, hey, Sarah, meet Nikki. Nikki, Sarah. And then you're like, I don't really know what to do. Like, Sarah's going to be like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, who's Nikki? Why are you going to introduce me to her? Right. So take it upon yourself to write something up, again, with their agreement that they'd like to have you do that, and toot your own horn a little bit. Okay. Now here's the next thing. When somebody goes out of their way to make an introduction on your behalf, whether you asked for it or not, but definitely when you did ask for it, your job is to follow up right away. Don't wait. So this is the don't wait for the person they're introducing you to make the first move, because they likely won't. Right? So they might get busy. They might go, oh, she's probably going to take it upon herself to reach out to me. So then I'll respond then. And then, time goes by, you're waiting for them. They're waiting for you. They forget because they've got no skin in this game. This is all on you. So don't wait. And this is what happened. This was one of the situations that happened was somebody made an introduction for somebody, and they never even followed up on it. It went nowhere. Now, it could be that it went into their spam folder. I don't know. Things happen, right? Like, we all make missteps, like, give people grace. But at the same time, it doesn't bode well for that person wanting to make an introduction for you again when you don't follow up on that introduction. I have found over the years that when people make introductions on my behalf, especially when it's like there's a business opportunity here, I stop what I'm doing. I kind of it doesn't really matter what I'm doing unless I'm teaching, right? Or working with a client. But if I'm working on content, if I'm out shopping with my family, whatever, I will stop what I'm doing and I will take the 5 minutes to respond to that message. And there's some language on what that kind of follow-up message should be. This is something that I teach I teach it in the master classes. I teach it in the Sales Maven Society, like what the actual script is. So I'm not going to go into it today, but you need to have some script language like ready to go when somebody makes an introduction on your behalf. So you're not like scrambling, like, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything. No. Be prepared for this, especially if prospecting and business building is a part of your everyday routine or monthly routine, hopefully. Hopefully it's part of your sales routine in some way, but make sure that you're prepared and ready to go. So when somebody makes that introduction, you're like, I'm right on it. I'm ready to, go into action here. And I'm going to make it really easy for this person to take the next step. So here's the next do here, which I kind of have said, is it's your job to make it easy for that person to engage with you in some way. So I always like to, if somebody makes an introduction on my behalf, I send that immediate message and I invite them for an opportunity for us to get to know each other and find out a little bit more about each other and see if I could be a resource in some way. So that message goes right away. And I send then 3 possible times, ranges of time for us to possibly meet. I know I've talked about this on the podcast before. I preach about it inside the Sales Maven Society, and I am constantly like refining my clients' messaging with my private coaching clients to make sure they're including these 3 times when they want to get somebody on a call with them. And that could be, a phone call, it could be a Zoom session, or however you want to meet, an in-person, if that's an option for you. But your job is to make it really easy for that person to take action. Here's my don't with this. Do not send the person your calendar link and ask them to schedule a time on it. You're the person who asked for the introduction. You should do the work. And I love a calendar link. I think I've talked about this on the podcast too. I talk about this a lot with clients. So sometimes I miss, I always forget, did I talk about this on the podcast or do I just talk about this to 90% of every one of my clients? But when you send a calendar link, as easy as you know that it is, I love a calendar link too. But it kind of sends the message like, I'm too busy to do the work, so you do it. And again, if you want to earn that person's business, if there's a potential, business development opportunity there for you, you shouldn't be asking them to do any of the work initially. They don't even know that they're interested in talking to you yet. The last thing you want to do is break rapport by sending a calendar link. Even if you're thinking to yourself right now, but Nikki, I can write it in such a way that's going to sound so kind and it's to their benefit. I get it. You get to decide for yourself what to do. My advice is to not send a calendar link in this particular instance. The only way that I would recommend sending a calendar link is if I said, what do you think about us getting, scheduling a time to chat? Here are a few possible times. Please pick one that works best for you. Then I might say, or if you would prefer, here's a link to make it easy for you to pick a time that works better. Like that's the only place that I would put it, is after I showed, hey, I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to put in the effort here to get on a call with you. And I'm not going to ask you to do all the work. As a matter of fact, I find this a little bit like, I'm always super flattered when somebody wants to get on the phone with me. And I'm really always flattered when people ask me if I'll be a guest on their podcast. But every once in a while, I'll get somebody who will reach out and they'll be like, would you like to be a guest on my podcast, for this reason or that reason? And if so, please go to this link. And then they ask me to fill out this like intake form that takes like 45 minutes. And I'm thinking, do I want to? I'm not so sure. Like, I love to be a guest on podcasts, and I'm always flattered when people say yes. And I understand why people have all these intake forms and all of that. But sometimes I think, is this a rapport builder or is it a rapport breaker? I will say, because I have a team that specifically does do, reach outs for me to open doors for me to be a guest on a podcast. We often get asked to fill out, the team often gets asked to fill out intake forms, which I totally get when we're the people who are asking, for somebody to send that back. But sometimes we look at those and I'm like, no, I'm not willing to spend an hour to fill out an intake form, especially because I find 9 times out of 10, when I get on the podcast, they haven't even read the intake form. They don't even ask any of the questions that are on the intake form. And I feel like you just asked me to jump through a bunch of hoops. So why? Why are we time wasting? Why are we time sucking when the rest, all the world, all of us are so busy, and time is such a precious commodity? I find this too, and now I'm off topic a little bit, but I find this too when people want to schedule time with you and you ask them to fill out an intake form. And I get it, especially those of you who have super successful businesses, you have very limited time. I get it that you want somebody to fill out an intake form to be serious before you'll get on the call with them as a prospect. But if you're just asking somebody to go to jump through hoops because somebody somewhere told you should, you might want to take a step back and really question that. Or if you're doing it because you feel like that's the only way you can qualify a lead, you might want to learn how to do a better discovery call, right? There's a lot of things you can do that don't ask people to time suck. So again, back to the topic of this podcast, which is business development. You've got to do the work. Don't ask people to do the work for you when you're wanting to get their time. It's super important. Now, a couple things once you get on the actual call, they agree to have a call with you or they agree to have a meeting with you. The one thing you want to do right off the bat is build rapport. So the Sales Maven philosophy is, relationship first, rapport always. And you've got to spend some time building rapport. The thing that I would caution you from doing is launching right into a sales pitch or your story. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. Let me tell you my story. So my background is blah, 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 blah. People do this all the time. It drives me nuts. And I think, this is such a missed opportunity because again, most of us, the whole world revolves around us. If you've listened to the podcast, you know that I talk about this a lot, that we all think the world revolves around us. Everything that happens is because of me, to me, or, against me in some way. I think most people walk around with this mentality. So your story, although is super interesting to you, is less interesting to the person who has agreed to give you a few minutes of their time to get to know you a little bit. Not that you can't share your story, but it should feel like a conversation. It shouldn't feel like a speech, right? I don't know. I haven't told this story. I don't think I've told this story on the podcast. I might have. If you listen to the podcast, I love to tell stories. But I one time had somebody introduce me to somebody, and she was like, Nikki, I think you should, meet this person. She has this opportunity. I think it might be a good fit for you. And so, we got on, I was building rapport. Now, again, this was somebody who was trying to earn my money, and it was quite a bit of money. It was like a $20,000 investment. So maybe to you, that's not a lot of money, but to me, that's a lot of money. So, the friend that connected us, I was definitely interested in, keeping that relationship going. And so I was willing to get on the phone with this person, hear a little bit more about it. Wasn't so sure I was going to spend 20 grand, but I'm open. And we get on the phone, and she says, well, I've looked at your website. Here's what I know about you. So she starts off by telling me what she knows about me, which in some ways you might think is flattering, but in a lot of other ways, it comes off a little like, why do I need to be here in this conversation if all you're going to do is tell me what you know about me? Again, sales is supposed to be a conversation. Sales is something you do with somebody, not to somebody. So telling somebody all the things you know about them, again, like, are you talking at me or are you talking with me? So in this particular case, she tells me what she knows about me. Then she asks me to fill in the blanks, I guess, or something. And so I do this little 2-minute background about myself. And then I was like, well, tell me a little bit about your background. And I'm not joking. Because I like to tell stories, I always put and find myself in these situations where she talked nonstop for 40 minutes. Her story about herself and her business took her 40 minutes to get out. Now, she had the time of her life telling me this story. I actually am a really good listener. I wasn't that interested in her story, but I was super interested in the way that she was choosing to sell me her $20,000 package, which was a 40-minute dissertation on herself and her business. And, after about 5 minutes of her talking, now I'm in this mode of I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this as a teaching moment. So I get really in and curious when I start to think ooh, this could be a really great teaching moment. I'm going to tell this story again, that this is what happened. This is a what not to do. And so I start the timer. I'm watching and writing down on the timer. And I'm doing things like giving indicators just to see if she'll pick them up. I'm going I'm not even saying anything other than that. For 40 minutes, she talked at me. It was horrific and funny, right? Funny because who would sit there for 40 minutes and not interrupt the person? I will, because I think it's a funny story to be able to tell you later. But again, she wanted to earn my business, somebody that she knows and who thinks really highly of her and frankly had invested in her program, was I think this would be a really great program for my friend Nikki. And so let me do an introduction. And so I was willing to take that call, but I was a potential client for her. So after 40 minutes of her talking at me, I think then she issued the invitation for me to sign up for the program, which I tried to keep rapport intact and respectfully declined. And then, went about trying to never have another conversation with her again, which I have been almost successful. I've only been stuck in one other conversation with her since, but I was much more strategic and I got out of it really quickly. It was at a live event because I knew, I was I'm not getting sucked back into this. I already have a story from her. I'm not giving her another 40 minutes of my time. So when you start off the conversation, it needs to be a conversation. It needs to be a back and forth, ask a question of them. And then if they ask the question back of you, give a pretty succinct answer. Really, when your answers are more than about 2 or 3 sentences long, after about 3 sentences, you're kind of in this, what I call word vomiting situation. It's also a form of dog calling energy. If you've heard me talk about creating curiosity, once you go past about 3 sentences to give an answer to something, you're kind of in a word vomit situation. So it's time to be quiet. It's time to ask them a question. Conversation has back and forth flow. Sometimes I always think about it like it's like a wave that comes in on the ocean and then it recedes, and then the next wave comes in and then it recedes. Like that's what a good conversation feels like. And if you find the ocean relaxing and the waves rushing into the shore and then receding, like to me, that's what a conversation should feel like. And anything other than that, it's like, it's probably not that fun. Okay, so here's a couple more do's and don'ts when you get on the call with somebody. Do ask them if you can be a resource to them in some way. After they've found out a little bit about what you do and you understand a little bit more about them and what they need or want, or a little bit more about their business, ask if you might be a resource in some way. Don't assume that they're going to tell you, yes, I want to hire you, or no, I don't. Be on the lookout for buying signals. They often come in those conversations. I can say from experience that I have had many conversations with people without going into it thinking that, oh, I'm talking to a potential client. It was just an introduction that actually then did turn into, they started giving buying signals, and then I issued invitations. So sometimes a really subtle invitation is, how could I best be a resource to you? That's a subtle invitation. A more direct invitation is, is this something you'd be interested in working on together? Like that's a more direct invitation. So be willing to issue those invitations in the conversation. And then if the conversation ends and it doesn't end with you guys agreeing to do business or for them saying like, yeah, send me a proposal or whatever, here's the next do. Continue to build relationship after that initial call if you're still interested and suspect that there is some potential opportunity down the road. Engage with them on social media. It's so interesting how as much as like we all get busy, but the people who really engage with you on social media, I just find that like we pay attention to that, right? Because there's so much noise out there. So when somebody's taking the time to like comment on your stuff, like you're probably paying more attention to them than you are anybody else. So go and comment on the stuff that they're doing, engage with them, connect with them on LinkedIn, make sure you're sending a connection. Friend them on Facebook, follow them on Instagram or whatever your platform is, but start to engage with them in some way. It keeps you more front of mind because often a no today can become a yes down the road when additional rapport is built, when that know, like, and trust factor, and frankly, when a need arises. So they might not have a need initially when you talk to them, but that could come back around. So be willing to continue to build a relationship with people that you would like to earn their business and doing it in a more subtle way. It doesn't always have to be like, I'm going to call you again in a month and see if you're ready to buy from me then, right? Like throughout that month, if you are going to call them in a month, engage with them, comment, share, whatever that means for you on social media. I know sometimes people are like, I'm so sick of social media, but it's still a really great way to stay front of mind for people by engaging with them in some way. All right. So those are the do's and don'ts. I went a little bit deeper around this idea of making introductions and the business development side and, just be careful about getting yourself into these situations where people are not going to make introductions for you again if you don't follow up and if you're not respectful or if you come across too pushy or too aggressive. I didn't really talk about that so much, but maybe I should address that a little bit before we wrap this up. When you get on the phone and somebody has gone out of their way to make an introduction or you get a meeting with that person, make sure that you're on your best behavior, right? Like don't come off as salesy and aggressive and pushy. And again, Do not tell people all the things that you know about them and all the reasons why they should hire you when they haven't indicated in any way that they're interested in hiring you, because that's what gets people turned off. And then they'll go back to their friend and be like, please don't make any more introductions to me, to your friends, because they're salesy or they're gross. And then you're kind of off their list, right? So be careful about that too. All right. I hope you found this episode helpful. I hope it gave you some things to think about. I said I was going to leave you with more. I have one more tip for you. This is a little bit of it's still around introductions, but when you make an introduction for somebody, if you want to make yourself memorable, go above and beyond just like, hey, Sarah, meet Nikki, Nikki, meet Sarah. I call this pouring love on people, but really, highlight people in their best possible way. Because when you make an introduction and you can really be like, hey, here's all these amazing things and why you might want to talk to my friend Sarah. Sarah, here's all these amazing things that I love about Nikki and why you might want to talk to her. Please take it from here. If you're the person making the introduction, go above and beyond, because people remember that. People often say to me, Nikki, you make the best introductions. And I do, because I go out of my way to really try to highlight the things that make people special and unique, or things that I think will allow for them to start a conversation. I don't want it to just be I don't really know where to go from here. I want them to get on the call or their meeting and be excited to get to know each other. So pour some love on people too. All right. That really is the last tip in this particular episode. As we wrap this up today, if you know that you need some help igniting your sales and you are ready to take that next step, and frankly, if you want to hang out with some experts and mentors, then you're invited to join the Sales Maven Society. This is the place where we'll connect, me and you and many other absolutely unbelievable, the most phenomenal business people around the world that are in this group. But you bring your questions and your concerns around sales, and I'm going to provide answers and guidance so that we continue to boost your confidence in all of your sales situations. And you can join the Sales Maven Society today by going to www.salesmavensociety.com. The price of the membership it's $107 a month. And I have a special code for you for your first month to come check it out and see, what do you think of all these experts in there? What do you think of this training? What do you think about having me in your back pocket to ask questions of? So if you enter the coupon code at the bottom of the page, you'll see there's a place to enter a coupon code. Enter 27trial, all one word, the number 2, the number 7, and then TRIAL. It will take $80 off your first month membership. So you can come in for your first month for $27, try it out. There's no long-term commitment. You can cancel at any time, but come join, come hang out with us. There's a lot going on in there, and I'd love to have you. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.